privilege of receiving, of having Martin Scorsese in a conversation with Jacques Audiard, Rebecca Zlotowski, Cédric Lapiche, and Bertrand Monello.
First time for me at Cannes, and it was almost the best time because of anonymity and trying very hard to change that, make it not anonymous. Well, what I mean by that is that you were able to go on the Croisette, I go from table to table, place to place, meet everybody. It was all exciting. Meet dubious financiers, wonderful stars, actors, producers, directors, I think vendors and Herzog and so many others. It was just an amazing, amazing time. And, this film was championed by... sadly, he just passed away, is Pierre Rission. He was the one who championed this picture to be here. And so he was fantastic in terms of discussing cinema on all levels, particularly some American cinema. I met him, and of course, and Tavernier at that time. This was still, it's important to know, still a period of discovery, not just for new filmmakers, but for older, neglected filmmakers. And Pierre and Bertrand and everybody was here. It was all bringing up names, new names. John Hauer, describing the geography of the scenes in any Raoul Walsh film. The geography of each set. That you know exactly, I'll never forget what they told me that time. You know exactly where you are, where the wall is, where that door is, without any fancy camera moves. You know exactly the logic of the location itself. That's just with Walsh. And then we were talking about a director that Pierre had mentioned as soon as I met him. He says, I found a new auteur. Yeah, John Auer, A-U-E-R. He made some films at Republic. And I know you have to translate. Okay, do you want to try that? Not just yeah, one more bit is that finally Paramount Pictures now owns the Republic Library. They've restored them all. We presented shows that I curated at the Museum of Modern Art of Republic Films, and of course the John Hauer films have been restored. It's been 40 years later. When I told that to Bertrand, he said, about time. Well, this is where it did start, yeah. I mean, this was the international platform for Mean Streets, a film I didn't even think might get distributed at that when we made it. So it was a very, very, very clear beginning of so much internationally. I'm not sure if I learned anything. The question that it posed was something that I was growing up with in my life, which was being, as far as my perception was concerned as a child and as a young adult, a very dangerous place on many levels. Populated by some very tough people and some very good people, then both, bad and good in one. And I always, basically, it's how to, I know it may sound absurd, but it's how does one lead a good life, a moral life, in a world that is not, in a world that is, I guess, more like described maybe in Los Olvidados. I think there's no doubt that the characters in those films, basically they're the same characters. And I think over the years I've been more attracted to material and characters that reflect them. And particularly, I guess, male relationships, brothers, I think, to a certain extent. I have one older brother in my own life, and a lot of it is reflected in these films. I find that I feel more comfortable with that material and can explore the characters better. Ultimately, it's a matter of, if you're living in a bad place and you're behaving badly, are you really intrinsically bad? Or is there good in you? And is there such a thing in the first place? It had a lot to do with responsibility. What I saw, my father, my uncles, my mother, all of the responsibility to each other, to family, to others in power. Responsibility and obligation. Where does obligation end, if it should, at all? Most of Mean Streets, it took me years to really understand, even though a lot of the film is what I was living at the time, in the early 60s. It took me years to really understand that it really is about my father and his youngest brother. Until the day they died. And his youngest brother died only a few months after him. My father was still doing favors, as they say. My mother was saying, don't do it, but he was, as they say, always in trouble. He was always in and out of jail and that sort of thing. But I loved him. He was amazing. And this is a family of, I think, on my mother's side, 6 or 7 children. My father's side, 6 or 7. I forget. That's why they only had 2. But it was that, and the dramas, or what one could consider, I was saying the other day, what you would consider melodrama. Melodrama to us was drama. It was tragedy. There's no such thing. I'm sorry, that's all, and so this was a daily occurrence and major discussions and philosophical and moral discussions with serious consequences. It reminds me of an anecdote of Gurdjieff, the guru Gurdjieff. He had his group at one point, I forget what year, maybe in the 30s, and he had a group of people that he was teaching his students, his devotees, but there was one who was a real pain in the neck. Really annoying, irritating, impossible, And finally, that person just stormed away and left. And the rest of the students said, oh, thank God he's gone. And Gurdjieff said, no, he was our teacher. Oh, no. Really? Teaching in school. He died last year. But he was the one who made me realize that we have to go for more. What I mean is not settle and really explore what, I know it's a difficult thing, but I explore this concept of love and compassion and in life. And I had to do it because the other alternative was violence and murder. I mean, that's what I think, what I saw around me. Ugliness and some beauty, But the only hope would be to find that in yourself, to be able to deal with others that way. That's all. It was really interesting. He gave us Graham Greene to read. Dwight MacDonald, who was a radical journalist. Loved movies, loved westerns. Very tough on all of us. I was even thrown out of the altar boys because I just could not. I was so lazy. I could not get to that 7 o'clock mass. And they threw me out. Yeah. But anyway, it stayed a friend, and what he taught us those years, then you have to translate. What he taught us those years, myself and a number of other kids in those streets, was really remarkable. Yes, that's what think that's what I perceived. I think that's what I experienced. I experienced great love, too, there, and my family and others. But I sensed it. I knew it. There was something wrong. And yet, some of the wrong doers, so to speak, actually were sometimes very good people. So it just makes me think of what we are as human beings. Intrinsically, are we, when it comes down to it, when it comes down to it, will we, what makes one person save another and another one run away? You know, would I run away? I guess so. You know, like Kijiji. And so I have to it's a continual confrontation with that. That's why the opening of the film, you don't make up for sins, meaning do penance or try to balance your life. You don't make up for sins in a little building on a Sunday morning or a Saturday or a Friday. You have to do it. You have to do it in life. You have to do it with everyone around you, and you may not make it. You may not make it. You know. But that's why I like that story that Endo wrote, Silence, because with Kichijiro, he keeps trying, even though he's a wretch. That's why humor is so important.
C'est pour ça que l'humour est si important.
Because it was my other brother, so many of my friends, so much of my life down there, and the comedy, the daily comedy tragedy was there. It reminds me, it's I think Manuel de la Vera did a film about a virus. I forget the name of the...
C'est pas illustré dans des comédies grand public?
No, but he made a film about scholar and cleric in the period when Queen Christina in Spain, in Sweden, and there's a debate between him and another scholar of the church.
Là, c'est le moment où dans le public vous pouvez donner le nom de ce film et gagner tout le respect de Marty instantanément.
What's that? Oh yes, it's in Portuguese. Sorry, but it's interesting because one takes on the philosopher Democritus, who was always laughing, and the other takes the opposite position, and ultimately he points out that the one who takes the opposite position deals with the philosophers who cried, who decried the situation, the human condition. And at the end, the hero of this film points out that Democritus may be laughing, but it's the same thing. It's crying. So humor is very important, you know. And that also was sometimes what's the word, seductive way of being seduced by people who may have been sociopaths or psychopaths. I don't know, but they were very funny. That's very dangerous. So, but the humor and part of the American style or Italian style, the Italian commedia dell'arte, the Italian style of entertainment and liking an audience. Yes, wanted them to like you too, but they're not all going to. So, I thought After Hours was a comedy, but a nightmare. A very funny nightmare. It was like that film, Mother. People keep coming in the house. She tells her husband, get rid of them. No. Oh, they're going to be fine. Fine. They destroy everything. People eat the baby. This is madness.
Did you like it?
I like it. Yes, I liked it. I was saying yesterday, I had a dream like that 2 nights ago. I couldn't get out. I couldn't get to the people kept coming in. No, you don't belong. Oh, it's fine. Don't worry. Oh, my God. So what was the question? That was funny as hell. Yeah, funny. All he wanted to do was meet somebody and maybe, you know, have a relationship. relationship or love or whatever, and he has to suffer for it. It's like starting dating again, like when you're, at that time, in the 80s, it's a different world now. I'm beyond that point. It's like, when you would have to meet somebody for the first time, and at a certain point it gets really, at a certain age, you know.
Why are you looking at me like that?
What's it?
He looks at me.
No, I was looking at you because I'm on the set. No, but it's like the really working at this sense of who you are, what you're worth, and then being locked in a world where you don't know the rules, which is most anywhere, I think. So how the plots, if I could do plot, that would be interesting. I find it very difficult to do plot and work that out. That was like a puzzle also. Yeah, it's almost like working on Rubik Cube, in a way, on film, in my mind, at that time.
Ce à quoi ça me fait penser, c'est de faire un film comme un Rubik's Cube. Et ça, c'est quelque chose que je
And King of Comedy is, I don't know if it's a comedy. I don't think it is, you know. I found it very hard to make. It was a De Niro pushed me into making it. And I had a very, very hard time facing what was so uncomfortable in that film. And also learning about myself, too, as almost like Rupert. Ça se sent. Yeah. Sometimes I just didn't want to show up on set. And Jerry Lewis would be waiting.
Mais pourquoi si malheureuse?
I was going through a difficult time, and I found that maybe, it was the last time I saw Jerry, or next to last time, Jerry Lewis, he's 91 at the time, and he said, somebody asked him, what do you look for when you make a film? He says, well, I get there, I start to work, or whatever, and if I'm not having a good time, then something's wrong. And not having a good time doesn't necessarily mean laughter, but if you're not focused and something is not working, you shouldn't be doing it. And so I had to face that every day because of the unraveling of how much of myself was in Rupert and how much I was beginning to really understand what Jerry was going through. Also, he was very patient with us. And it was extremely, and one of the great, I didn't even move the camera, I think once or twice. So it was a very claustrophobic and kind of disturbing picture to make, for me. Yes, I think it was at times really embarrassed by it, about my own feelings. And, because, a lot of what Rupert talked about in that film, about New York talk shows. I grew up with that. I knew exactly who he was talking to. I know them in Los Angeles. We're going to do something in Toronto in a few days with a comedy group. I'm going to shoot one of the Jimmy Kimmel is going to be the host. And so I'm fascinated by the development of the talk show going back to 1951. And what we saw on those shows, including anywhere from, opera singers, people like Mel Torme and Jack Kerouac. I mean, wild. It was wild at that time. Maybe not that much anymore, but in those days, for those 10 years, it was extraordinary for people who didn't have access to that culture. But there are many different, that film is very complex for me, so there are many different things we could talk about there. I'm afraid it would be too much time to take. Great question. I mean, the Eastwood point, what I mean by that is that Jean Renoir, Buñuel, it looks effortless, but it's not, huh? You can come around and say, yeah, just do that. Oh, no, you don't. No, you don't. You have here and here, and and I don't know how you're doing it, but forget it. Anyway, it's a deceptively simple style and total professional way of working. Originally, because, again, it's the old story of working class, no books in the house, terrible asthma, not able to play sports or anything like that, so I get to watch the movies. So, moving images and music, lots of music from everywhere. Combined, along with the dramas that I saw that were happening in the household and in the streets, all combined. And the only way I could try to express any of these stories or ideas was in little drawings. And they became, I guess, what you would call storyboards in a way. But I'm only very secure, usually before a picture. I lock myself away for 2 weeks and draw it all, or design it all. Lately, I found that certain scenes, how should I put it? Do you want to translate? Recently, ultimately it had to do with composition, size of people in the frame, camera movement, but most importantly, editing. The one shot goes to another shot, goes to another shot. And in most of the films I made, that's for example, all the boxing scenes in Raging Bull were designed on paper and in drawings. All of Taxi Driver, all of Mean Streets, and primarily on Mean Streets and Taxi Driver because of the short schedule. I had to I need this to show to the cameraman, say I have to have that, this sort of thing. And explain it all how I saw it. Yet, at the same time, the heaviest influences in Kazan, the films of Kazan in the 50s, where you're going to have a two-shot, you could hold a camera, and it's the people in the frame. Or even John Ford in a number of films where he would just hold the camera on two actors, and he or she would go off into what seemed like an improvisation in a Western a film called Two Rode Together. In any event, what I'm saying is that ultimately, some cases I've stopped doing drawings and notes for certain dialogue sequences. I need to work with the actors. I need to be there. I need to be on the set. I need to be on the set for like 10 minutes to see what it looks like. I need to be at a location, but in the case of this latest film, for example, there were so many scenes, almost 300 scenes, that it was hard to get to locations. So I saw videos, and nevertheless, when I got there, I'd work out the angles, but it was primarily bringing out the actors. It was primarily making he or she comfortable, and that became the mise-en-scène for me, and that has a lot to do with on the waterfront, east of Eden, the Wild River, beautiful films. Yeah. Also, point out that all the dialogue scenes in Raging Bull were not planned in terms of design. The design in those were the location, the decor, placement of the actors, and then movement of the actors, and certain camera positions, and the black and white. I knew I felt secure there. You see, we shot all the fight scenes first. 10 weeks. And then we went, it was supposed to be 3. Yeah. And then we started. So in a way there was a balance, but a lot of that is influenced by watching, or being, not watching Kazan, experiencing Kazan films at the age of 14, 15, and Cassavetes, ultimately. For example, Taxi Driver and Mean Streets and Goodfellas and Casino, all drawn, or got to the point where I did little drawings. Yeah. And there are some scenes you just do, and part of it is the panic of suddenly being there, and you hadn't planned on something, and you have to do it. and there's an excitement in the panic, and we may be cursing again, but it's the way you make the film, you know. And we hope for accidents. We hope for the good accidents, huh? You know, that's where, show me something happened, you know. For example, a good accident, quote unquote, is, are you talking to me? I'm not going to stop that. I'm there, you know. He was saying, yeah, and, but we were being attacked because we were so far over schedule. They were trying to pull us out. I said, no, wait. And also, you think I'm funny. That was a planned accident. Joe said, I'll only do the movie if I tell you a story and you put it in the film. He said, well, you don't have to put it in the film, but here's the story. And he tells me the story that happened to him. And I said, I got it. I didn't even put it in the script because I knew where we could shoot it. And only shot 2 cameras. And squeezed it in on a day that we were shooting something else. So that was, we felt very secure. We had rehearsed that, though. We did rehearse that. We rehearsed, and I combined different takes of dialogue so that the actors would Oh yeah, no, Ray worked it out with Joe. We did rehearsals, they did versions, and I took those, typed them up, and changed the scenes, and then gave it back to them. And they did that on the set. Oh, that film, yes, many scenes. Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah. I'm trying to think. It was some of the dialogue, for example, some of it was written, but the dialogue between Joe Pesci and Bob De Niro in the desert. That's a key moment where it opened, and also the dialogue between Pesci and De Niro in his house, and Bob is wearing this. De Niro's wearing this pink robe. That was a scene too that opened, and a lot of the scenes with Sharon Stone. Bob helped and moved, and we'd start shooting without them even realizing we were shooting to get a sense from her, you know. But yes, no specific scenes as in Taxi Driver or Goodfellas, but a strange film, yeah. Oh yes, there was nowhere else I could go. We would implode, you know. I mean, the whole beginning of the film, he gets out and he's wearing his, pink jacket, and cream-colored pants and shoes. He gets in the car, turns the ignition, and the car blows up. And it is, once you have everything, they're given paradise, and it's the fall of man, right? They're expelled from paradise, you know, and through pride. It's the same story. But in terms of that life, the only place, the next level is self-destruction, complete self-destruction and explosion. The whole lifestyle, everything that, especially, I think, at that time, the Vegas thing was, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Really. Well, you take that as a philosophy, where's that culture going, you see? And so for me, it was to explode it. And yes, you're right, music doubles, the voiceover, they're arguing in the voiceover, two people. Avoiding of that? No, I think it's an interest in so many things at once, and wanting to say so much at once. I loved, I was very affected by the first 4 or 5 minutes of José Jim. Image after image after image in it. And so much was being covered. You know, art, relationships, the world that they were in, all that sort of thing. And it had a life to it, it had a joy to it, I thought. And so, the speed, how fast can we go? And that's, you're absolutely right, that's where we wound up in Kundun. They had to start all over. But in music, for example, I was always very struck by an example of very, very fast music, like Mahavishnu Orchestra, John McLaughlin, In a Mounting Flame. And when I first heard it, I'm not into jazz that much, but it goes so fast that internally you find peace. It is so fast that the only thing you can do is, and it's cleansing. It's cleansing. And so there's that attraction, maybe an attraction like a moth to a flame, but there's that attraction to that speed. It forces me to see things differently. Maybe when I do hold the camera, I find that is affected by having done so many things that are so fast. It has to have a strength to it when I hold the shot. But that's the tension. That's the kind of compulsion to make a movie, somehow knowing it's going to be at times miserable because of that tension. And also when to stop, when to say, no, don't, that's enough with that scene, let's go, that's enough with this shot. I don't know. I never know what it's going to be. I have an idea of the whole, but I never know how I'm going to get there. So it's a constant anxiety. That's why there's a lot of laughter. Yeah, that's what I joke around about, because it's the only way to get us through it. I take it that way, anyway. I perceive it that way. I perceive everything around me that way, so I have to lighten it up for myself to get through. I usually don't, for many years, take into account that much the difficulties of production. And then when I'm there, so I go look at everyone and I say, how did we get here? Now we have to do this. So I never really, recently I've had to, there's no doubt. Getting older, climbing mountains in Taipei. I'm a city person, so that was wonderful, but it was a very, very taxing shoot. But no, it's the tension of the two. If it happens so quickly and so, I don't know if it happens. That's why I do a lot of these non-fiction films, the music films, the George Harrison film, the Dylan film. We have a new one we're finishing now. It's like finding non-linear stories, so to speak, like music, film like music. And I find that frees me to deal with the narrative films I'm making. And maybe I can find other ways of telling, as you guys are doing. You're doing your own films. You have non-linear ways of working. It's an extraordinary way of telling stories. And it's not to try to be different to match the modern world. I don't know what that is. So I just need to explore. Well, that's the danger. It's very dangerous. And often you may find, you've sacrificed something for, not an effect, but a stylistic touch. And you may not know it at that moment, But that's the danger. And I'm not saying, I certainly don't think I've been successful with it all the time, but when it does work, I think it was worth the try. But it's like Rodin with the statue of Balzac, right? With Everybody admired the hands. Supposedly, there's a story that I heard. They all get, the beautiful hands of the statue. Oh, it's like beautiful hands. So Rodin picked up an axe, went in, and cut the hands off. You shouldn't be looking at the hands. Look at the whole thing. I don't know if I can cut the hands off. That's why I love working with Thelma Screwmaker for 30 years now. We're old friends, and she helps me with all this. So, even now, the past 5 years, I've been looking at something and then we're putting it together. And we're trying. And then at a certain point, she says, I don't know about this. So when I get to now, she goes, I don't know about this now. It's the beautiful shot. What's going to happen? I said, oh, God, take it out. Take it out, now. Get the goddamn thing out. We screen the picture. We run it back. Fine. But I'm not going to go through that. I said, just, what's the worst that can happen? It goes. Now what? Just don't. And she goes, oh, I'm afraid we're going to, yes. I'll just do it. That's that kind of. Yeah, I mean, at that time, both my parents were just dead. They just died. Right in 1992 or 96, 97. So this was very much on my mind, along with the realization of my father and my uncle's roles in my life in Mean Streets. And so what I think we shared was something that I wanted to share with an audience that not everybody would share it with me, I know, but I think that was the desire, that maybe there are one or two young people out there who are in a similar situation or respond to it, also a communal experience, which is good for some of the films. But it was a way of sharing these feelings, these thoughts with a lot of people. That also includes the good, not just the good, not just this happy, the bad too, the dynamic of the family. Yes, exactly. But I mean, yes, we're all going to disappear. But cinema's all over. But why cinema disappear now? Who said so? Well, because they're not making money off it. No, let's push. And so I got to tell you, some of the experiences, I don't start mentioning titles, but some of the things I went through, seeing films, especially in the early teens and into my 20s, responding to films in such an extraordinarily emotional way and psychological impact that this can't go away. It has to affect other people in similar ways. I always tell the story, called Dreyer's Or Debt. I won't look at it again. I saw it once. It's too moving for me. And it's always in my head. It's always there. Some of the French films, some of the Italian films, some American, even we all loved The Searchers, John Ford. I thought I had enough of it until I screened it again. And then it happened all over again. And you have an emotional cry. And somehow, sometimes, certain films, and I don't want to mention names because I know I should have said others, and I missed them, but I had a kind of, it's like a religious experience or a feeling of release, a feeling of release, kind of transcendent experience watching it. Your life changes. It just does. And so why allow those to disappear? If you can do something about it, let's do it. Thank you. I think it is very similar. Granted, at that time, life was changing so radically for me. And it was beginning again. It began again. I met my present wife. We had a child. She's 18 now. And so she reminds me of my mother. And like we were forced to start all over again. Wow. I mean, so for me, yes, something came out of that. And I always dream all the time of showing my youngest daughter. I have two older daughters too. Now I have a granddaughter also. She's 5. So, poor kid, I can't show her those movies though. But I always think, if Francesca could see this, if Domenica could see this, you know. And I always think of sharing that with them. And it's interesting with the younger ones, when my youngest daughter, Francesca, is at the age of 2, we started showing films on a big screen in the screening room, animation films, and you know. But then slowly slipped in Chaplin, Keaton, Harold Lloyd, a musical, comedy, Howard Hawks. And before you realize it, her and her friends have seen over 300 films. They think they're spending, they don't know. They've got a history of cinema. So when they're confronted with the films of today, so to speak, there's a balance. And they may not use it. They may not need to use it, but at least they're aware of these experiences that we had. One of the strongest experiences the young kids had was to Sunrise, Murnau's film. They were nervous about films without dialogue, but that didn't matter. That they were yelling back at the screen, telling her, don't go with him, he's going to kill you. They were like 10 years old. So, no. A silent film, you know. So for me, this is sharing that for others, and also young people or people seeing films for the first time that have been restored, like Inamorata today. It's an extraordinary picture, you know. Quixote that we're going to do. We're doing both versions of The Killers at Universal, with Robert Siodmak and Don Siegel. And so, no, it's exciting when a young person comes up and says, I saw Night of the Hunter for the first time. You know, I saw La Dolce Vita for the first time. I saw Once Upon a Time in the West on a big screen. And so this is something, you never know where it's going to go, but at least it's out there.